podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Greetings, listeners. I'm Tom. Hope you're all well. I'm still here, year older, but no new baby yet. In case you missed the pod over the international break, we're expecting baby number 2 pretty much any time now. Well, between now and the start of May. So let's get on with it while I'm still around. And yes, unfortunately, I'm a little bit raspy still. I can officially deny I'm back on the B&H. It's just a bit of leftover, whatever this was, but I'm much more able to chat a bit longer this time without Sam jumping in to save the day. And yes, here's the man himself, flying high after Tom DeRecket's working miracles over at Saints. How you doing, mate? All good?
Yeah, I mean, it's half time in the Southampton-Blackburn game, so the spirits could be down by the end of the stream, but it's looking pretty good at the moment. I can't remember the last time I was this enthused by my club playing football. So yeah, that's nice. But of course, we're not in the Premier League, so we're not FPL relevant. Maybe next season, but I'll keep that to one side for today. I also should say a happy birthday to you, Tom. Congratulations on passing another year by. Was it a good one?
A bit of a forgotten one, to be honest, because my daughter's birthday is a few days before. So I spent most of the weekend doing stuff for her. And by the time Sunday rolled around, we were so knackered that I just didn't do very much out of the ordinary, to be fair. But I mean, that's fine. That's fine. It is what it is. As you get older, you have kids, and your birthday just disappears as a consideration over the horizon.
Well, hopefully we can reward your birthday with another green arrow ahead of us. Of course, we did both get small ones this week, but we'll come on to that later on. As always, we are Who Got the Assist. On today's agenda, we'll be running through our team performance for Game Week 32. I don't think it will take quite as long as usual because our teams have some remarkable similarities in the 11, so we can probably do both at once. The big double, of course, is on the horizon. So double Game Week 33, the biggest one of the season, will be worth taking a proper look at. The main issue is that many who did wildcard last week are pretty well set up. They know what they're doing for this week. So we're going to take a slightly different approach overall. We'll have a look at the games and what interests us ahead of double Game Week 33, of course. We're also going to take a look at what's going on with Nico O'Reilly, the one big injury doubt ahead of Game Week 33. There's a blurry photo going around that we're obviously going to pick apart to the nth degree. And of course, have a look at the replacements. If he is indeed ruled out, I doubt Pep's going to say too much, but we'll have a look anyway. And of course, we'll be taking a look at free hit drafts ahead of Game Week 33, because we know that this week is also a popular week for that one, as well as maybe some wildcards out there as well, I've seen as well. Then, of course, we'll do our normal 1 week punts and captaincy. But of course, as I'm sure you've kind of gathered, we don't think it's going to take quite as long as it might usually take to get through all of that information. So we're sticking on a bit of a meta discussion towards the end of the pod, mainly just to have a talk about the current state of the game this season, how the end game is shaping up, and of course, with many of us on quite similar strategies or similar sides, what we feel like the final few game weeks are going to look like for a lot of us, whether we're optimistic about it, whether we're pessimistic. I think you can tell which one of us is going to be on either side of that debate at the moment. And of course, in the background, currently going on is the Liverpool PSG game. Ekatike's gone off injured. We'll have a chat about that if anything relevant happens. Of course, Arsenal is yet to play. We've got Villa, Forest and Palace playing in other competitions in Europe during the week. Not a ton of FPL interest there for many of us, bar Gabriel, but I'm sure there's ownership dotted around for a few different players there. Shall we start off with a quick game week review for Game Week 32, though, Tom?
Yeah. It's a really fun game of spot the difference.
It is.
Between two very, very diverse sides. I suspect that you're going to end up kind of just saying what I've got to say. But you're up first. So, yeah, tell us how you did.
Yeah, 58 points. It's a really fun week. Green arrow of 15-ish K up to 317K overall. My 11, I'll read it out so you don't have to, is Verbruggen, 9-pointer, O'Reilly, 14, Gabriel and Van Heck with 4 and 5 respectively. So actually returns from all of my defensive players, which was unexpected, I think it's fair to say. Into the midfield, a bit more disappointing, although Bruno at least got an assist. Palmer hit DEFCON, weirdly enough, and Gross picked up an assist for 6 points for him. Then the rest were all blanks. So Semenyo, Calvert-Lewin, Joao Pedro, and Haaland all blanked, but they all felt, maybe bar Calvert-Lewin, like wallpaper picks. So yeah, what more can you say? It was a pretty template wild card. Unfortunately, because of the teams that wildcard that have a double game week in game week 33, if you did set up for a bench boost, you're picking from a pretty narrow pool, as we discussed on the pod last week, barring 1 or 2, maybe 3 positions. It felt fairly well set, and that I guess the combination and the fact that you were wildcarding into a bench boost was, in theory at least, that was going to be the thing that would set you apart. Although I know a lot of big accounts did end up hitting the wild card quite late on. It might have just pulled the vacuum of effective ownership towards the wild card overall. So yeah, 58 points for me. Slight green arrow. Yeah, I'm running out of time to make up the ground, but a green's a green. And in a week where I was actually a bit more worried about what the wildcard would look like against the crowd, not too bad. Although I will say quickly, I did add up the points I would have got if I didn't wildcard. And if I'd bought Bowen as I would have planned to do, it would have scored me 71 points. So I'm 13 points down on strategy B right now. But crucially, I'll be bench boosting. And the other strategy, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So yeah, fingers crossed that it comes good next week and down the straight, but it's a decent start. It's fine, I suppose.
Yeah, it's always good on a game week result basis to get a tiny green on the week you're probably slated to suffer.
Yeah.
Nico O'Reilly, is fair to say, saved the wild card. Without that 14-pointer, I think things do look a bit more desperate. The ream of different situations you could have wild carded into, and there's obviously that concern that you were wildcarding out of a strong side into a slightly weaker one, and that maybe could be evinced by your kind of pre and post scores not being as good as you'd like. I didn't talk to myself, I didn't look, but I'm sure it would have been kind of similar. On the wildcard, Ragaboli live FPL did say that wildcarders did outscore the average, which is kind of fine. I kind of feel like there was a lot of obviously focus on big bangs from West Ham, especially Bowen, Mavropanos. I did see a couple of accounts go there. I got him in draft, and that was lovely. Don't think anyone had Reefer, did they really?
No.
Yeah, I think getting that O'Reilly bang was really quite big. Yeah, as you say, it's kind of just the case that setting up for next week and trying to maximize next week, that was the whole point of it. And it did seem like there was a lot of maybe kind of consideration given to the wild card, as you kind of referenced, by a lot of the big accounts who initially saying they wouldn't, and then they would. And then I think that when FPL reopened again, it did sort of feel like a lot of the effective ownerships were a lot higher than I thought they were going to be. I've got the same team as you. The only difference is you've got Strike, I've got Senesi,
yeah,
and I've got 1.7 million in the bank. That's kind of it. But I think we just need to see what happens kind of next week. I just can't imagine there's going to be kind of there's going to be a lot of people basically with a very, very similar team. And on that, I mean, we'll talk about a bit more about it later on. But just as an initial sort of, if you don't want to stick around for the meta chat, just to summarize how we're feeling, I'm a bit pessimistic about it. You're more optimistic about it. Water is still wet. And I said to you, I'm a little bit torn on that. Like, I do feel like a bit of a sense of anticlimax when it comes to how the season may unfold. Now that I've seen that loads of people have got 58 points this week, loads of people have got a very similar team. And many of us, especially if you're a 1 free transfer going into this, looking at a very similar set of moves into the end game. And even though the team itself was differential, it feels like wildcarders may not. We might do. You never know. We might see kind of big rank jumps next week. But my main kind of disappointment with the EOs being relatively high for this particular wildcard team is that it just caps the ceiling
Yeah.
for the surge you can make. So yeah, I mean that's kind of my initial sort of play here. But overall, yeah, having a green arrow on your birthday weekend is always good. So yeah, I'm sticking to the positives for now. We just laying the runway, paving the runway for taking off next week.
Absolutely. And for what it's worth, I also share your concern that the ownerships are high, and it does feel like time's running out for me because I'm chasing 100k. I'm quite far off. You're within it. I need big jumps at some point, and there aren't many weeks to do that. So I could have used fewer people wildcarding and this to be a more of a differential strategy. But at the end of the day, hope is all I've got. So I'm going to skew optimistic and hope that at some point there's a combination of players. And I will maintain that, and we talk about it on the pod quite a lot, to be fair, it's not necessarily one or two players in isolation, it's the combination. And when you're on bench boost, you've got all 15. There will be players in there that combined, if they all haul, or if a certain amount of them are able to haul, you can still make the gains. It's just dependent on making sure that the players that you don't own then don't go and haul. And unfortunately, that's kind of what happened this week. Bowen, Thiago, especially Van Dijk, if they had not have hauled, we'd be laughing right now and saying this wildcard was a genius move and we're miles up on everything and we've gained 20 points already. But there are plenty of players that we don't own that are also very capable of doing well over the next 8-9 weeks. So although the wildcard is fairly template, I'm still convinced that if these guys are the ones that are scoring points and the others that we don't own don't score the points, there is still that margin to gain. But there are some good players out there that we don't own and they are likely to score points. So we just need a bit of good fortune, really, especially me.
Definitely.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
We're all massively hostages of circumstance as well. I mean, when West Ham looked like they might win it, I had a wild card which had Bowen and Mavropanos in it, didn't I? Yeah. And like that would have been, everyone would have owned those players and we'd all be sat here with like 80 points laughing about the fact that, it's been a great wildcard week, but, despite having a massive week, actually it's not been as great as we thought it might have been, So I feel like we've been having discussion regardless, but you're right that every opportunity or every juncture, we will see players who are kind of off template doing well for people, and that's just the nature of FPL. If you serve up, basically just giving yourself up to variance, aren't you? And speaking of which, the double game week 33 fixtures, quite a long old week from Saturday to Wednesday. And the doublers are City have got Arsenal at home, Burnley away, Brighton, Spurs away, Chelsea at home, Chelsea United at home, Brighton away, Bournemouth, Newcastle away, Leeds at home, Lee with Wolves at home and Bournemouth away, and Burnley also double for anyone who cares, Forest away and Man City at home. I mean, I think the one thing actually that stands out the most to me, really, Sam, is the Leeds double, just because of the proximity to that semi-final against Chelsea, and their proximity to kind of putative safety. So if they beat Wolves, I was listening to Clash of the Correspondents with Neil Grover and Ed Salinger on Planet FPL while I was doing cooking dinner, and Ed, the Leeds correspondent on there, was saying that if they do beat Wolves, he couldn't guarantee that players like DCL would be playing in that Bournemouth game, because Leeds haven't been in haven't had a Wembley day for a long time, a semi-final for a long time, been that close to a final for a long time. Didn't know how much Farke would kind of value the cup over the league, but I mean, I think that actually, that those two games probably are the best FDR out there in terms of a combination. But there's a big, and we'll come on to it in the free hit as well, a big sort of but about that second game in particular, which I can't help but get away from, which is why I actually only went with Darlow and DCL as it was, and found the room for Senesi over Strauk.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Although Leeds win that game against Wolves, they're only on 39. I don't think that that's a point in which Farke's going to take it easy and just say, oh yeah, league's fine, we're safe. I don't honestly see that happening. I get that a Leeds fan has said that that's a possibility and they're going to be more clued in than I am, but managers are very competitive, players are very competitive. Yeah, they want to do well in a semi-final in the FA Cup, absolutely, but these are not players that have been run into the ground with European football all season long. I wouldn't be too concerned unless someone picks up an injury in game one. I'm not worried about a player like DCL, for instance, starting both. He's proven that he's capable of starting multiple games a week this season. Especially someone even more so than DCL, I'd say like Strauch, for instance. I'd have almost no worry whatsoever. Darlow again has been the league keeper. He's not going to get rested unless he has a howler and then gets dropped, but that's completely different. But that could be relevant to any player in any double game week ever. I'm not particularly worried, but I would say that because I own him and it benefits me to not have to worry about that. So I'm it's not something that has really registered for me. I'm not going to lie, but maybe it's something that I've overlooked. By Wednesday evening, time will tell, but I don't think so.
I mean, I won the triple Bournemouth, Newcastle away and Leeds at home. Really stuttering Newcastle. I really like that both of their games due to caveats. So Newcastle's season really fizzling out. I had a look at their XGC from the start of the calendar year, Sam, and they're third from bottom, which is really poor. And the mid-table for XG as well. And that kind of, I suppose that, and then linked with the Leeds game, we learned today that Iraola is leaving at the end of the contract, but they do have a lot to play for. And I just wonder, they're a hard team to beat and play very well. Yes, there's a 4-day gap, but they've also then got a big gap after that with no cup involvement. I do really like both of their games as well, which is why I was keen to try to get a triple, but I'm never touching Evan Nilsson with a barge pole. And it was very much sort of like Tavernier and then the two centre backs sort of made the case for me, I guess. But I think that Bournemouth Leeds game actually Wednesday is the one I'll be, obviously Man City but I'll have kind of quite template players there.
Yeah,
that'll be the one I think I'll be looking at, hoping for kind of the returns, really, the double clean sheet, plus hopefully Tavernier finally bringing home the bacon.
Yeah, if Tav could finish like even one chance across this double game week, I'd be very pleasantly surprised because he's been poor at finishing his dinner recently. Same goes for DCL, by the way. I don't know how on earth he didn't return against Man United. I don't know if you saw that game, but my God.
I saw the underlying data. So I posted that on Blue Sky.
I actually don't think the underlying data does it justice. Like, I saw the data after the game because I was like, oh, that must have been crazy high. I really thought that he should have had better data than he got, having seen the match. And there were some chances that were like, that should be like a 0.5, 0.6, and it only got credited with like 0.3 or something. But yeah, God, he is a bad finisher. It does make me quite worried, but across 2 weeks, if he does play both, fingers crossed. But yeah, Bournemouth, double defense, I think is a very, very solid option. If you've got Senesi and Hill, you're looking at probably an 8-point floor for each across the double, because the DEFCON ratio is so high for both of them. It's just a matter of whether or not they concede several. Hopefully with those kind of fixtures, you'd think that they should keep the score lines fairly low. So yeah, if you've got both, again, you're looking at a pretty high floor. Then I picked Tav as the best attacker, but I also wouldn't hate Krupi if you're on a free hit. I think he's been playing his way into the starting 11 recently. Obviously, 10 goals as a teenager in the Premier League is no easy feat. He's cheap enough that it'd be worth the punt. It's just whether or not you think he starts twice, which is difficult to call. But if I knew he started twice, I'd probably pick him ahead of DCL. So it's how you read those expected minutes if you're on a free hit, for instance. But I think the safe three is the two DEFCON guys, Hill and Senesi, and then Tav for a little bit of penalty share and a bit of the data as well.
Yeah. Okay. No, I understand. What you mean. Yeah, I'm more than I'm pretty keen for the triple up there. Yeah, Brighton kind of mid on everything effectively. Defensively, fairly sound defensively, sort of middle of the road. I think the double defense probably is absolutely, absolutely nailed in for probably the majority of wildcarders. I just wonder whether the free hit's going to go that way. That's all I'm thinking. It doesn't feel like that's going to be replicated across the board. Bit of a Jekyll and Hyde team, two tough fixtures on paper at least. I don't know, man. I don't know whether that kind of high ownership for defences is going to be carried across to free hits. Most free hits I've seen don't have those Brighton players.
Yeah, I think Brighton is going to be the one, the key difference or the key swing between wildcarders from last week and those who are free hitting or wildcarding this week, because obviously wildcarders last week are going to be setting up for a bench boost. Most likely they brought in Brighton players to start them last week against Burnley. Obviously it paid dividends for quite a few of them. And if you're bench boosting, obviously they're going to be hanging around and scoring you points regardless of whether you pick them in the starting 11. So in both of our teams, I think we've got Verbruggen, Van Heck and Gross. Two of them are on the bench for me this week for the bench boost. I would assume you're quite similar. Not that it makes any tangible difference anyway, but I think the free hitters this week, I would look at that double and think, yeah, it's pretty good. But defensively, I would back the two DEFCON guys at Bournemouth. And then offensively, Welbeck's minutes are questionable across the double. You just don't know if he will start both. Then you look at the midfielders and you're like, yeah, each on their own merit is pretty good, but you need to know that any of the wingers start both of the matches. And right now there are 3 going into 2 spots, so that's quite tough to predict. Then you got Gross, who as a longer term pick is great, but for a free hit on 1 week, it's a bit limited upside. There are maybe some more exciting picks around his price point. Then you've got Hinchelwood, who probably isn't nailed, gets brought off a bit early. It's less confident, I would say, in the Brighton team going into the double. And I think there are better picks in all of those positions, which means for me that if you were wildcarding last week, and you have them on your bench, those are the players that you're kind of going up against the free hitters this week with. And it's not a bad double to do so. Tottenham away, Chelsea at home, it's not awful. You can see some returns in there. So I'm hopeful, but I think that's where the key difference will be between the two strategies for this week.
Yeah, no, certainly. Other two, we'll come on to City in a minute with O'Reilly. Chelsea, obviously some questions surrounding the third, if you do go for a third. Both of us haven't. I think Palmer and João Pedro, absolutely fine. I do think there is a bit of a caveat around United. So no Martinez and Maguire. So Heaven and Euro looking like the back two for them again in that United game. And United obviously had a bit of a wobble. And Brighton solid, but obviously rather unpredictable. Potentially one to less of interest, but the FA Cup again on midweek may be something which slightly impacts things.
Yeah, possibly. I'm downplaying the FA Cup stuff myself, but I hadn't actually really considered it as a potential for rotation. Especially, I can see it more with Leeds if they get to 39 and they feel like they're safe. But Chelsea are they need to get a Champions League spot. They've got teams right up behind them fighting for that spot, and they need to especially beat Man United to try and regain some ground on them and get themselves back into the top 5. So I unless it's a matter of fitness, I don't think they're going to rotate against Brighton. Certainly not against Man United. Brighton maybe a little bit more likely. And given Palmer, for instance, has had his fitness issues all season, then maybe there's a slight worry there. But he's proven often enough recently that he's capable of playing 3 times in relatively quick succession. João Pedro as well. I can see early subs though. And some of the peripheral picks like Esteval or Garnacho, those kind of picks, I can see getting a little bit more rotation around the edge pieces. And I probably wouldn't be experimenting too much outside of the core 2. maybe with the asterisks of Enzo Fernandez being back in the fold, if you're on a free hit, tripling up on attack, especially because I don't really have much interest in them defensively. Tripling up with the attack, all three of which have very good underlying data. I don't mind Enzo as a 6.5. I think he could be interesting. So I'd have a look at him. But yeah, I wouldn't be going towards the defense personally.
No, it just seems a bit, yeah, I don't know. It seems like kind of just, we'll come on to it in the free hit in a second, but it just feels like filling out for filling out's sake.
Yeah.
More than anything else. Okay. And Man City with the big game against Arsenal, which could decide the title, and then Burnley away. A big sort of a mudding of the water has come through O'Reilly, who came off in the 60-something minute. Obviously initially quite a lot of worries about him, but he has been pictured by City's Portuguese account.
At least we think it's him.
Maybe it could be Max Lane or some wags was saying, in a blurry pic behind Haaland. Now, obviously, we don't know when it was taken, it's one of those which obviously muddies the water a little bit for us as FPL managers on wildcard, who were trying to just set up roll the transfer this week. Certainly very annoying, Sam. And I do have maybe some worry. I think it's probably good that Southampton, with all due respect to Southampton, in the FA Cup. But I don't know. I've still got some worries. He might be a single game weeker at this point if something kind of still hanging around. And given the fact they can play Ake or Nori at left back and the likes of Reinders at central midfield in that midweek game, I don't know. My default is he basically remains there unless I hear something ironclad to make me take him out. But it does sort of make me worry that my bench is basically, realistically, him, Bruno and Gabriel as single game weekers, and then Verbruggen.
Yeah, he's going to be the problem this week. I can already sense that we're not going to get any sort of concrete news from Pep. Maybe he pulls a surprise and gives us something ironclad, but he rarely does. And it's such a big game. And we know that O'Reilly can be the difference in this exact fixture. Obviously, he did it in the final. So they're going to want to keep the cards fairly close to their chest on him. I kind of feel like this picture that we're seeing, if it is O'Reilly blurred in the background, that's a bit of a blunder by the Portuguese account, because I imagine all social media managers have been kind of given a little nudge saying, by the way, let's keep him out of any pictures just so Arsenal don't know. So if it is him, and I've got to say, I'm 95% sure that it is him being blurred, like in the background. I like looking at Max Lane as well. I don't want to speculate about like a blurred image for half an hour or anything, but to me, it looks more like O'Reilly. That aside, there's still no proof that means he's in full training, because players with minor injuries do go out for a quick warm up, get involved in some activation work, and then will effectively move on to the gym work aside from the players who then go out and basically play in the five-a-side drills, all of that. So just because he is pictured doesn't necessarily mean he's fully fit. So there's that issue to deal with. I don't think Pep's going to say anything ironclad by any means. So with that in mind, what are wildcarders from last week to do? Well, we're in a sticky position. I know personally from my point of view, if there is any proper doubt over him even playing against Arsenal, I think I'd be tempted to make the move to either Gahey, although that does seem a little bit boring, or something that has occurred to me is maybe instead of replacing O'Reilly with Gahey, possibly replacing him with someone like Senesi for me, because I've still got that extra Bournemouth slot. The floor's very high, as we just spoke about with those Bournemouth defenders. And it does mean that down the line, when City have another double game week, I can get back to O'Reilly if I wanted to, but also I could have a bit more fun and go with Cherky, because I've got the extra Man City slot by game week 36 if I did sell O'Reilly for Senesi, for instance. I created my plan across the rest of the season knowing that, okay, I'll have Gabriel now, knowing that he's not ideal on a bench boost, but it does mean that I've got one more free transfer wiggle room at some point as a break glass and emergency situation. This could be it. This could be that moment. But you got to think, if at any point we see O'Reilly in proper training. We can see him kicking a ball, blah, blah, blah. It's such a big game. You've got to think he plays against Arsenal. And I think the second he plays against Arsenal, for me, I think he's very, very likely to then also play against Burnley. Now, I understand that maybe he could get rested in that game, but I love my club. We're in great form right now. Southampton have been amazing. It's more likely he gets rested against Southampton than Burnley. And if he's fit enough for playing Arsenal, if they beat Arsenal or even draw against them, they are in a title hunt. They're not going to play any sort of rotated team unless they absolutely need to. And that will be based on his fitness alone. They won't rotate for the sake of freshness at this point. It's the run-in. They need to win every single match. And they know, well, after playing Southampton last season, they dropped points against us. They've dropped points against teams in the relegation zone before. Pep is not going to take it lightly. So I think if he's fit for Arsenal, he probably plays 65, 70 minutes against Burnley. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah. Okay. Well, fingers crossed. Let's see. Just small question as well. If you did go with Matoma, Sam,
yeah,
what would you do with that? Would you move it out, or would you kind of just hope he does start one, bench one, in the double if you're a wild card last week?
Yeah.
10 minutes against Burnley. I mean, that's a bit of a kick in the teeth if you did go there. I know a few accounts were fairly bullish on it.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you'd side all that across to something else. But I suppose if you did go kind of quite template, except you went with Matoma over I think Gross was the one that most people could go with. That's a bit of a tough one to sort of get your head round, isn't it? I don't know. That probably only affects a few people. But
yeah, it's an interesting one because Matoma, up until recently, has been one of Hertzler's preferred guys. He doesn't usually get benched, and it's only been fairly recent that we've noticed him, mainly down to injury, but obviously coming back from injury, he hasn't been quite as nailed as he used to be. I've got to think, though, across 2 games in quick succession, he's going to start at least one. I'd be surprised if he didn't, and because of that, I would be tempted to just hold on to him. It's not ideal, and there are players out there I'd expect to do better at around the same price. So if you've got loads of free transfers, maybe making the switch makes sense. But I do think he'll start at least one and then get minutes off the bench in the other, which already then limits the amount of potential for upside by making that transfer. Now, the one pairing of moves that I would get on board with quite readily is if O'Reilly is out and you don't fancy Matoma, if you've got a few free transfers spare, then maybe you could do a double switcheroo there, bring in another defender that isn't a City player and get Ryan Cherky in the midfield. Now, that could be really interesting, but I think that's on the proviso that O'Reilly's definitely out and that basically you've got enough free transfers to get you by for the rest of the season. You don't have to worry about using 2 now. So I think if you've got maybe 4 free transfers, maybe 3, then that double switch could be interesting. But aside from that, I think I'd be tempted to hold.
Yeah. All right. Let's go on to the free hit then. We've got a friend of the pod, Chris Knowles' free hit here. Obviously, yours might be a little bit different. I know there's a lot of people also wildcarding, and I think that would be a slightly different configuration. Be looking kind of more at 35 as well. Although the fact is, as we mentioned last week, that a lot of the 33 friendly players do land quite nicely in 35. If you're wildcarding this week, I'm assuming you're free hitting in 34. But yeah, I guess getting your 11 of doublers is absolutely kind of where this kind of goes. Looking at Darlow in goal here, Truffaut as the pick over Hill, which probably is just a differential thing, as Senesi and Justin. I'm guessing that's another differential thing. I think that probably Briol was Strout most. That means there's no City defender that comes in the midfield. So Cherky and Semenyo alongside Palmer and Tavernier, and up front the predictable João Pedro, Calvert-Lewin and Haaland. Let's not bother with the bench because that is probably going to be immaterial on double game week. So key points difference, I guess, Sam. We mentioned the lack of Brighton coverage at the back. And I guess it's the third City. Is that sort of where we're playing, I guess, if we're looking to differentiate on a free hit this week?
I think so. I think that will be one of the key differences between those who wildcarded last week into this bench boost or into this game week, and those that have the choice of picking fresh now, obviously the information we've got on O'Reilly might lead you towards just, okay, well, we're going to power into the City attack. There's good reason for it as well. They're way ahead on the projected goals across the double game week. If you look at all the market data, which I know is popular these days, they are ahead on expected clean sheets as well for the odds, but they're not miles ahead. They're like an extra 10% on top of Leeds, for example. I think they're like 60% to get 1+ clean sheet. Leeds are 50%. So there's not a huge gap. But crucially, in defence, you've got Leeds players who are 3.9 million. You've got 3 or 4 options there. Loads of them are very good on DEFCON. So already that floor raises for them. They don't even necessarily need to keep the clean sheet to level out with the Man City players because they're getting the DEFCON, whereas City defenders just aren't. Same goes for Bournemouth as well. Senesi and Hill can very easily get close to the Man City players without as good clean sheet odds. So I think you can kind of take on the City defense and cover them with other defenses and the DEFCONs that those defenders have. Whereas in attack, they are miles ahead on the projections for goals. And you've got Haaland and Semenyo are just going to be in almost everyone's team. So that third pick is the differentiator. Now, Cherky's going to be the one for most people. He was sensational in game week 32. I think, honestly, whenever he's on the pitch, he's sensational. We all love him. It's just whether or not he's on the pitch for long enough. But it looks like in the new system that Pep's kind of curated over the last few weeks, he has become more central, more of a focal point to the attack and the way that City build up. So I would be surprised if he got benched in either of the next two. He probably gets something like 70 minutes against Arsenal, then gets brought off if they're in the lead and they get to they try and maybe solidify. And Cherky isn't a great runner. He's not someone who has a great high press. He's not very disciplined. And then against Burnley, if he gets even 60 minutes, that's probably enough to get a return or two. So I think that's the way I'd play it. It would be, if there's any sort of doubt over O'Reilly, you just go triple City attack, because none of the other City defenders have carried the upside of O'Reilly. Meanwhile, the defenders from other teams have the baseline of the DEFCON to get them close without even necessarily needing the clean sheet.
Yeah. I mean, that's. I suppose there might be enough sort of enough to cover you, I guess. I really like the Cherky pick.
Yeah,
who's my 1 week pump for the week? One player we're gonna wish I had. I felt like at the time of what we knew last week, it felt just too beyond obvious to have that triple up. But as it stands, I think that's kind of the main differentiator here. Other players to consider, we've got notes on the right. Goalkeepers, forget about it. Defenders, maybe a Forest one against Burnley, Mavropanos versus Palace. But I mean, realistically, I think it's configuration of the kind of the set that's there. I suppose it's whether you kind of want to quote unquote cover that Brighton exposure or not. I don't know. With the 2 games, Spurs and Chelsea, I don't know. I wouldn't be cock a hoop about that. And as you mentioned earlier on with the DEFCONs, I think it's probably okay. In mid, your man Enzo, Sam, you mentioned earlier on, there's always Neto as an outside pick. Ryan Okafor put his hand up, but whether his fitness is going to be good enough to handle both of those games, we don't know. And then Gibbs White against Burnley. You mentioned Creepy earlier on, and then Bowen versus Palace, another one. Just never Evan Nilsson, basically, is what I'd say.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And may I just quickly pose a eggs in baskets free hit if you want to kind of shoot for the moon somewhat. That it's not like a million different players, but I think it's the combinations that could be quite powerful. So you're kind of placing bets on certain events happening, and if they do happen, then your quid's in. So maybe if you fancied something a bit different, you could go, I'm not going to have Calvert-Lewin. I'm going to go 2 up top with João Pedro and Haaland. I'll go triple City attack, so include Cherky and Semenyo. Triple Chelsea attack, so Pedro, Palmer and Enzo. So you've got 6 of those. Add Tav or another midfielder in there. So you're playing a 3-5-2. and then go triple Leeds defence with an extra Bournemouth player as well. So Darlow, Bio and Strauch alongside either Senesi or Hill, or just go double Leeds defence, double Bournemouth defence. So you can get that balance the way you want it. But I would be tempted, given how annoyingly template a lot of these picks are, to shoot for the moon by having those like combination plays that, okay, it is all or nothing. If Chelsea score none across the double, you're basically screwed. Same goes for City. Or if Leeds don't keep a clean sheet, again, same problem. But you need a limited amount of events to go in your favour, and you're waiting on those specific events. If they do happen, you could have huge upside. Obviously, the negative is the flip side of that. But I'd be tempted to do the all-in strategy, given that I think the teams that are doubling and the best players in each of those teams, it kind of does lend itself to a potential all-in strategy. Like, the 3 best Chelsea picks are attackers. The 3 best City picks are probably attackers, unless O'Reilly's definitely fit. And then Bournemouth and Leeds, I would say, are probably just about better off defensively as picks anyway. So I'd have a look at that as a little bit of a differential play if you fancy it.
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult to get to like avoid some opposing players, but I mean, it's doable within this context. And I think that could be quite an interesting way to do your free hit. And yeah, that's an interesting point, and maybe one that we can think about a bit more next week. I don't know, actually. Next week, I think it'll probably be easier, won't it?
Maybe.
But yeah, I don't know. I was thinking it'd be quite hard to avoid opposing players, but you can probably just about maneuver your way around to make that work. Elsewhere, likes of Palmer, likes of kind of João Pedro, Semenyo. Yeah, boring, but I still think the price quality heuristic stands here. Good players in any given week, like Palmer, just go off. It's probably better to have them rather than not. If you're wildcarding though, Sam, to what extent do you still include these players? So, as or if you're just kind of transferring your way through. I was speaking to Nick earlier, who's said, I'm just I don't want to miss out on Palmer going off. That's the reason why I'm going to be buying him in regardless, which sort of makes sense to me. And maybe there'll be a bit more of a smattering of single game weekers on your bench. I know that it's mentioned in the chat about why are you free hitting and having double game weekers on your bench? Well, I guess it's just because of injuries and because of money and because of why not.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you are making transfers, then obviously you are going to have someone like a Bruno, Gabriel, all these sorts of players are still going to be kind of hanging around for you, almost definitely. But be on your bench, I think I don't really see kind of free hit or on a if you're wildcarding, why you wouldn't have 11 doublers this week. I don't think. I just can't really see a case to go against it unless you really feel strongly about a Forest defender or Gibbs White or maybe a West Ham player.
Yeah, I think given some of the stronger teams don't have the best fixtures this week, if they are a single game week, so Liverpool, Man United, they've got they're okay fixtures. Obviously, Man United away at Chelsea is not brilliant, but you do back Bruno to always be a decent option. If Liverpool, for example, have Burnley at home, then there might be more of an argument and more people floating the idea of, let's start a Liverpool defender or something. Maybe not defender, that's probably a poor example, but you get my point. I think some of the best fixtures for the single game weekers are carried by teams that don't necessarily have loads of really great high upside players, and therefore it does just make it slightly more obvious to go for the full 11 of doublers. If I was wildcarding, the starting 11 would be almost identical. It'd be the bench that changes to maybe either Henderson or Raya, and then Bruno, Gabriel, and a Palace defender. That would probably be it. And set yourself up for the future double game week a little bit for Palace. Obviously, you've got Triple City anyway, and Arsenal have some good games. So Gabriel and Raya, or just Gabriel, makes a lot of sense. And Bruno makes sense to hold because he's Bruno. But yeah, aside from that, if you're free hitting, and just to round off the point about having doublers on the bench, it's more of a psychological thing. If you see points on the bench, it is annoying, but it doesn't matter. I never really worry too much about points on my bench personally. It's annoying, but it doesn't make any actual tangible difference. I'd prefer to
No.
have those points there just in case Palmer pulls up with an injury in the warm-up of game 1 and all of a sudden I need those points off the bench, the same way that I'd prefer to have a good first bench option week to week that is scoring 5+ points just in case the rainy day does hit. It's better to have it. But obviously the odds of that being required in a double game week are lower. I still think it's worth doing just in case though.
Yeah. All right. I mean, I think we'll come back to this in the meta chat, but it does feel like you're kind of limited, really. I look at the free hit this week and feel like it's kind of within the 11, you're optimized just narrowly for the fixtures in front of you. Some bits are, I'd still kind of think that maybe a Brighton defender would be nice to have, or maybe Chuck Verbruggen in goal over Darlow. It's very. I don't envy those on free hit this week. I think it's actually quite tricky. You kind of just go with the Cherky differential, almost definitely, in fact, over O'Reilly, and then kind of you're maybe kind of just playing a similar game. I don't know, but maybe you're kind of hoping that you're kind of within 10 points of a bench boost, and I think that's probably a win for you. Similar for wildcarding, and if you're transferring your way through, I'm sure you knew as hell what was coming. And I think that again, that's a good yardstick. If you're kind of 10, 15 points off the wildcard, even if you have a small red, I think that's absolutely fine. Sorry, off the bench boost, I think that's absolutely fine for this week. I don't know. As you most noted, the double has never been the most intimidating double in the world to not be completely covered for. And I think that is borne out by the fact that the free hits and the wild cards, even though, the games, the sheer volume of games on paper is something to be thought about. The overall nature of the individuals who we've chosen shouldn't really worry anybody too much. So even the City players who got Arsenal as part of that double, and that in of itself is a massive but, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I think the wildcard free here and wildcarders from last week, the 11, maybe barring like Cherky versus O'Reilly, generally it's going to score relatively similar. There might be like one outstanding performance from a differential that not many people have, but I think if you're on a wildcard or a free hit this week, unfortunately, it's more likely you're going to get a red arrow than usual on those chips because a lot of people are also bench boosting. But if you can just stay, like you say, within 10 or 15 points of those that bench boost, you are effectively giving yourself a bit of a leg up for later on if you're going to use the bench boost down the line, because then all you need to do is match up that 10 or 15 points or improve upon it to therefore then have the advantage. So looking at what our benches are likely to be, we'll come on to what we expect the points to be on our benches, but I wouldn't be shocked if it was 15 points, let's say. If it's 20 plus, I'd be pretty happy. If it's 10 or below, it'd be a disaster. It wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world if it failed and free hit and wildcarders are only 5 or 10 points behind. And if that's the case, then I think you should be very, very happy with even a small red arrow for this week in particular, because you'll then make up the points later on down the line with the extra chips you've got. But yeah, I'm quite scared, honestly. I really need the bench boost to be a big success, and I'm worried it won't be.
All right, okay. I think I don't know what else we can say on it. It's aside from that, I think you all know the player set. It's just a case of making those individual decisions. Just to round off, 1 week punts this week, and last week I went with Bowen, 14 points for me, 185 overall, and I've gone with Cherky, and I'm playing my Joker this week. Both my Jokers, we play the Man City players for the 2 doubles. So yeah, Cherky for this one, probably Haaland for the last one in game week 36 when that comes around.
Oh, spoiler alert. I've only got 1 Joker left, so I won't be using one this week. And unfortunately, I've already used Semenyo. I don't want to use Haaland just yet because later on, of course. And I didn't want to copy you with Cherky either. So I thought I'd just have a bit of fun with it and back my boy, Dominic. Calvert-Lewin, LOL, fingers crossed he gets a few. But having watched the Man United game, it's not looking good. But yeah, we'll see. All a bit of fun.
I mean, it's one of those things where, like, I was saying to a friend of ours, James Stevenson, that you don't watch him when you're happy. You
Yeah,
know, you're like, oh,
yeah.
I'm glad I own him because he's putting up that amazing data. But if you do watch him, you're just tearing your hair out, aren't you?
It was
And
3 minutes. He missed an absolute sitter. I could not believe it. It was like just so typical.
that's Dominic Calvert-Lewin, man. He's
It
just
is.
cold.
It is.
It's just cold, isn't he? That's just the way he is.
He's an awful finisher.
Very, very
Anyway.
bad. Right, and the captaincy for this week. Yeah, Haaland, simple as that.
Yeah.
But again, if you're really chasing Sam, we put Calvert-Lewin and Palmer up here just for posterity. Any interest in kind of sticking the armband on Semenyo or indeed Palmer or something like that? For people who are chasing, because I mean, this would be a good time to do it. Probably. It's just that Burnley game for City does kind of make me think, oh, well, if you're gonna do it, maybe stick it on Semenyo rather than go kind of completely out of that. I'm not sure I want to be trusting Calvert-Lewin with my armband, that's for sure. That's a balls of steel sort of scenario. Yeah, I don't mind Palmer. You know, it could be a potential penalty in both games and something you're laughing.
Yeah.
But for the vast majority, I was expecting it's going to be Haaland.
Yeah, it's something that's playing on my mind more and more as the week's progressing, because I am 40 points off of top 100k. If I'm gonna make that or bridge that gap, bench boost will help me a little bit, but it won't make up 40 points. So I do need a bit of positive variance somewhere. The problem is Haaland is just so much the standout captain this week. He's miles ahead of everyone else, in my opinion, mainly because of that Burnley game. But crazy things do happen in FPL. Like if I backed Palmer, for instance, and I think it probably would be Palmer, because Semenyo, I love him, he's brilliant, but he's not on pens. He's not got those different routes to points. And if I'm backing a City player, in my mind, it should be Haaland. So I'm almost like, if I'm going against Haaland, I might as well go against captaining a City player and hope that they just don't score as many goals as I think they will across the double. So that brings my mind towards Palmer naturally. And of all players, he is one of the most explosive players in the league on his day. He does have the capability of bagging hat tricks, four goals in a game. Like, he's got that potential. He hasn't shown it much this season, but it does exist. So look, obviously we all know Haaland's the best captain, end of, but depending how much you're chasing, do you want to just play for luck a little bit? And if you are, I don't know if 40 points is enough for me to be chasing to this extent, but it is tempting to look elsewhere and just hope that the FPL gods are smiling upon me this weekend, because I do need that kind of big swing. And Palmer's got the capability to do that. Yeah, and Man United without those two centre-backs does help as well, to be fair. I hadn't actually clocked that, so thank you for bringing it up earlier.
Yeah, I want to think about Sam. I wouldn't hate it, or I wouldn't question. I would question it, but I also wouldn't as well.
Yeah,
to be honest,
it wouldn't be a logical call, but it would be playing the risk. Like, yeah, you've got to take a swing at some point, I guess.
Is Maguire actually still out?
I don't know. I was taking your word for it, to be honest.
I know he was suspended for Leeds. I don't know if that continues. Yeah, it was a dog show, wasn't it? I don't know. He got something to do with improper conduct, because there might be an extended ban. That's why I read that earlier on. Okay.
I'll have a look.
Yeah. All right then. Let's see. But yeah, so Haaland captain. But yeah, I do think that you're running out. Instead of running out of time, it might be the case that, I mean, Haaland's not going to be over 200% EO. So I don't know. It might be the way to go, Sam. Just try to shoot for the moon. There's definitely a valid play. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, I'll keep reiterating, it's not the logical call. No one like heed this advice and think that Palmer's the best captain. I know he's not. But if you're basically like just playing into luck, like in any given game week, Calvert-Lewin could score Haaland. It's unlikely, but it does happen. Mavropanos outscored Haaland by 19 points this week. So things do happen. It is possible. It's just unlikely. Palmer is one of the more likely ones to be able to get a big haul. So yeah, if you're really, really chasing, like I might be, I don't hate it. I'll think on it for the rest of the week.
Yeah, good point in the chat. Captain Palmer equals not Captain Haaland versus Burnley. Would you do that in some game week? Says Nobby. Well,
no,
yeah.
of course not. But that's what I just said. Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah. It's not logical. It's you're maximizing the potential for variance.
Exactly.
If I only ever did the logical thing, then if we all only ever did the logical thing, we'd all be on the same points all season long. So you have to go different at some point. Not saying I am doing it though. It's
leaning into the madness. All right, on to our both teams this week. Exactly the same. I don't think there's much to play with here.
One player, isn't it?
Yeah, -1 player. I mean, we could go on. You could look at yours. You could look at mine. Yours is a bit more zoomed in, so we'll look at yours. Yeah, I mean, expectations for bench points, I guess, is the key question. You've already heard what our teams are. You know what our teams are. It's the same as most people's. I mean, with 2 single game weekers, or maybe even 3 with O'Reilly. But yeah, I'm expecting the minimum I want is 12. So 4 times 2 for 2 doublers plus 2 singlers. So that's gives you 8 plus 4 equals 12. We could even revise that down to 10 if I think O'Reilly might not play the second game. But yeah, I mean, it's I've just been so many terrible bench boosts recently, Sam, over the last little while that I just I look at it and just think, oh, it's just such an emphasized chip in most people's minds that my expectations are always necessarily dampened. But you seem a little bit more like, these are great players. They could score regardless of the fact that Bruno's got Chelsea and Gabriel's got Arsenal.
Chelsea have not been a good defense recently at all. So Bruno, I'm not worried about. Any player can blank. We've just talked about it with Haaland. It's possible, but Bruno has been one of, if not the best FPL pick this season. Maybe actually bar Gabriel, to be fair, for points versus like value. Haaland's obviously scoring the most points, but he is 14.5 million, so it's slightly different. Yeah, I mean, seeing 2 players away against tough teams in a single game week when everyone else has a double it doesn't look great. But the way I'm looking at it is they are 2 of the best players in the game. If anyone is going to perform in a single game week, like maybe you would bench Gabriel away at Man City in a normal single game week, but I think you probably just start him. And if you've got double Arsenal defense, bench the other one, because he has got so much goal threat. Arsenal are so tight at the back. I think it's at least possible that they just stodge the game out of Man City and make sure it's a 0-0 draw, which we've seen plenty of times across several seasons in the Premier League. So it's not impossible he gets something. Bruno is Bruno, so whatever will be. He'll be well owned anyway. And then it's double Brighton defense. And Van Heck's decent on DEFCON. Verbruggen is very good on saves and also on bonus points. So I would be very disappointed if it got 10 or 12 points, put it that way. If we're podding this time next week and my bench booster scored 12, it's a failure. As long as all 15 have played, of course. If someone gets a random injury, it becomes slightly different. If it gets more than 15, I'd call it like a small win. If it gets more than 20, I'd call it a proper win. But all you need is like a Brighton clean sheet against Spurs, and you're in. Like all of a sudden, that's a great bench boost. And if Bruno happens to get a random assist against Chelsea, then it's a bonus. Same with Gabriel, even hitting DEFCON against Man City. All of these little events, even 1 or 2 of those events make the bench boost a relative success. It's only in the situation where absolutely everything fails that this is a proper failure of a bench boost. Of course, all things willing that O'Reilly's fit or you don't get a random injury elsewhere. So it does give me heart that 2 of the best players in the entire game this season are the 2 single game weekers on the bench, despite the fixture. And then you've got 2 other double game weekers who have different routes to points.
Yeah. No. All right. Let's cross everything and hope for the best. That's
Exactly.
all we can ever do as FPL managers. Right. If you're just here for nuts and bolts, that's it. But let's have a quick meta chat at the very end. So, just before we had some time, prompted by me feeling maybe a little bit dejected on seeing lack of differentials in the wildcard team, albeit you were right to counter by saying that there's still some percentage gains to be had. It's kind of, I don't know, we might do this for a few weeks coming up where there's not loads to discuss, but this might not happen again if things change. I don't know. But yeah, in terms of the end game. With the changes to the schedule to give the FA Cup some exclusivity, I wonder whether the fact that there are so many people on this particular wild card may be kind of a bit of a symptom of where FPL, in terms of the end game especially, is going. Like, do we end up with a more sort of dull end of the season now? Large double game weeks, like it seemed in the past completely random, are a bit of a thing of the past. So some stats from Ragabolly: 40% of the game is still active. Defined as making any changes to their team in the past 3 game weeks. Obviously, some people are just rolling free transfers and just chilling out, but that's probably very negligible. So, yeah, about 44% of the 12 million teams out there are still active. Interestingly, 37% of the top 100k wildcarded. OFPL said that 500,000 wildcards have been played, the highest number of wildcards activated since the second wildcard has become available. 11.5% of the top 100k had exactly the same wildcard draft. And then as you take players out, that percentage rises. Alongside kind of what we talk about commonalities. So 14 out of 15 in the same draft, 38%, 61%, 13 out of 15, 12 out of 15, 77%. You get the idea.
Yeah.
And it's got me thinking that, this kind of what we look forward to, kind of chip season, blanks and doubles, historically, that has been the time for FPL. It's been our Christmas. But I just wonder, looking at the teams out there, whether it has maybe become victim of becoming a bit beige due to the FA Cup schedule adjustments. I mean, these sort of, this randomness that we used to love about it has been kind of replaced by predictability, which is creating very samey end of season experiences. Like, we spoke about this, that we kind of both got a very similar strategy to the end of the season as the transfers. A roll this week, hopefully, if O'Reilly's okay, free hit 34, 35 roll, and 36 users who transfers to probably get Sarr and Munoz, and then maybe, slightly different in 38. And I do think it's probably something that does worry me a little bit in terms of the state of the game, in terms of the state of the end game, at least. Because, like, I guess kind of alongside the advent of the understanding of EO and what we've discussed in terms of some of the perhaps critiques of analytics, I think some of the magic maybe of FPL is lost a little bit more. Like, I think we're looking around and seeing lots of people having the exact same team. That feels like a bad thing to me when in terms of the game, which is just necessary due to the context, because of the fixtures and because these are all logical picks, regardless of your views and analytics. They were all logical picks to have. But the upshot of that is that potentially you could be stuck at your overall rank for a little while, or at least within this period when we were hoping to have those big gains. They're completely capped now, because there's going to be so many more people with the exact team as you. Maybe it's a case that free transfer a differentiator, especially through 35 to 38, if you're on the mainstream strategy. And I don't know, I wonder whether this is like the natural conclusion of the optimization of FPL. This kind of like march to the end, so many of us in lockstep when it comes to sensible team choices and a sensibly planned end game. This is where we've ended up, Sam, and it all feels a bit dull to me. But I don't know, maybe this has been heightened by it being a tricky season. Is it the case? Do you see it that way?
I think I'm going to surprise you because I'm more pessimistic than I let on, and I share a lot of your thoughts that you just mentioned there. This season has felt a bit of a grind. It's also felt frustratingly predictable at times, but I think it's not down to like necessarily one factor. I think the FA Cup thing has massively impacted it. It's made everything a little bit easier to predict and everything's laid out in advance. But then you add another piece on top of that, which is FPL's become so popular now. Like I will talk to a random mate down the pub, or I'll have a work colleague in a FPL league or something. They're much more informed than they ever were before, partly because that information is easy to deliver because it's more straight line. Like, it's okay, FA Cup weekends this weekend, we know when the double will be, we know which teams it will be, you know these things quite early on. But also the information is being broadcast by a lot more people, and a lot more people consume the content as well. So I think if you're in the top couple of million managers in the world right now, you're likely in a pool of players who are also all dealing with the same sort of information as you. You don't have a leg up like you might have used to 4 or 5 years ago, when following someone like Ben Crellin, for instance, was an advantage in of itself. That extra information of like, oh, I know the percentage chance of like this double game week dropping in here, obviously amplified by the extra randomness we had back then with the double game weeks, that massively helped. Now it does feel like there's a leveling of the playing field to a much lower engagement level, where anyone who's even giving a bit of a side eye to FPL will know most of this information just from logging into the FPL app. There are articles saying this is what's likely to happen in 4 or 5 weeks' time due to the FA Cup. Like, you can't move for information these days. So that's one side of it. But then I also think that this season has been a bit of a special case, partly because DEFCON's come in, and it has, again, through a slight coincidence in the way that the Premier League has changed itself and the style of play, but it's created a quite a small pool of players who are much more effective. You've got a wide raft of defenders now, like much more interesting, but they're all the DEFCON guys. You've kind of replaced all of the upside attacking defenders with DEFCON guys, and a lot of the midfielders have basically been replaced with the DEFCON guys as well. And I think that's slightly unlucky on FPL's part, because they brought in this new scoring system. It was meant to perhaps level the playing field and bring more players into the mix, but because DEFCON has been like heightened this season in the Premier League itself, it's put a lot of these players at a huge advantage in comparison to maybe a midfielder at 6 million who scores 6 and assists 7 times a season. They previously would have been interesting. Now, just get Elliot Anderson, Garner, even Alex Scott. You can replace those assists and goals, which are quite unpredictable, with almost guaranteed points across a season. And I think all of those elements together has meant that you could effectively zombie team it with a little bit of information, future planning on double game weeks to come, and you can probably chart a course for the majority of the season without really having any worries. And it's those of us who have gone off plan or taken a risk or tried to play in a traditional way that have been punished more often than not. The final thing I would say, though, that has made this an even more weird season than ever before, and it gives me optimism that future seasons won't necessarily be the same, is the highest priced players have been utterly terrible this year. Aside from Haaland, and even Haaland at times, they've all been awful. Like, we've been able to afford pretty much any team that has been effective all the way through the season, because Salah's been nowhere, Isak's been off the grid, Haaland's been good, but he's had his patches, Palmer's been injured, Saka's been injured, Bruno Fernandes started too cheap. It's just been really easy to get the exact team that is effectively optimal and just sit on it for weeks and weeks and weeks. And it has been harder to gain because of that as well, on top of the DEFCON making some of these players quite predictable and easy to just pick week on week. So I'm optimistic that future seasons might not be exactly the same, but there are the first few points I mentioned will be the same problem next season. So I've just got to hope the player base changes somewhat.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose the question is, when do FPL act on it? I mean, do they just take this year as like a bit of a one-off, a bit storm of all these sort of things, and then kind of just sees if it happens again next year? I do think that the fact that FA Cup fixtures are so kind of well televised, and as you say, there's all that knowledge, especially given the spoon, the whole idea of spoon feeding, which was always a thing back in the day when I suppose a lot of the veterans were a bit more gatekeepy about FPL. When my view and Nick's view when we started was always kind of like, oh, we'll share this hobby, then fantastic. We want more people to be interested in FPL than ever before. But that comes with consequences, and those consequences are that it's not the deepest game in the world, and a little bit of information does go a long way in terms of informing your play style, and all it takes is kind of just a slight bit of upskilling on kind of the critical mass, kind of your average player's behalf, and suddenly, as you mentioned earlier on, that edge is completely gone. And I think that's kind of where we're starting to where that sort of nub is at. The glory days of, as you said earlier on, like knowing a few stats, following the right people, and suddenly, you've got those sort of essential tips, which kind of means you win your mini league because, your man in marketing that you're playing against didn't realize the double game week's coming up, and there you are with 14 double game weekers and a bench boost, and he sat there with 15 out of fashion players and maybe a couple of bench boosts because he's lucky. Those sorts of things don't really happen anymore. I think on one hand, it's a great thing for those people who are really interested in FPL. I mean, I see that at work a lot. The people who talk to me about it, historically, maybe riffing on your point a bit, back in the day, people would talk to me about it for 2 months, and after that, it would be like kind of by January, I was like, so yeah, I know I haven't listened to my team for months. Whereas now people are still speaking to me about week to week, want to ask me what they're doing, or kind of what my views are on their team, or sort of thing. And it's people are getting the bug, or at least kind of stay in the course of the season, which was never a thing before. It was very unusual, in fact, that you saw kind of quote unquote casual players kind of see out a season. It was always kind of like, if you saw out one season, then you're more than likely going to kind of get the bug and be part of like a little sort of community of anoraks. And now it's become a little more mainstream, and trying to grapple with that is kind of where we're at. That plus the advent of analysts, as I mentioned earlier on, does mean that you have a lot of people now with the same knowledge, which leads to people making the same decisions, which leads to people kind of having the same team, and it leads to people having the same experience, which, especially in a competitive game, I think is not great. I think that's not good if you don't have any other option but to follow one particular path. That is not good. And I don't know whether that is just this season. It might be. It might not be. I think just because the fact that this schedule seems to be fixed, so the FA Cup gets its dedicated game weeks, that means that the double game weeks is going to be fairly well telegraphed. And within our current chip strategy, or our chip menu at the moment, the fact is that certain tools are going to be used at certain times. And I think that in of itself lends itself to this only continuing if they don't make a change. I know that loads of people, it's just mentioned in the chat by Kieran that loads of people do have super different teams, blah blah blah, and none are aware of YouTubers or FPL Twitter. That's fine. We all know about the Twitter bubble. I mean, I don't use FPL Twitter anymore, but I'm aware of the fact that there's a social media bubble. That's absolutely fine. But I think qualitatively and quantitatively, you can see through the effective ownerships kind of throughout the last few years that there are more people who are more aware of FPL viable players and FPL viable strategies. I think that is kind of completely the case. And that's because of how FPL and themselves, to their credit, I think, and how kind of, you've seen YouTubers like Ross, Oscar, just smash through the mainstream. And yeah, stuff like EO, stuff like analytics, the cat's out of the bag now. I don't think that's ever going to be put back in the bag, is it, Sam?
Yeah, I think the problem is FPL was really exciting for a lot of people, and over the years, it's picked up a bigger and a bigger following. And once you know the ins and outs of what makes a good FPL player, it becomes quite difficult to unlearn that information. And we're all working off the same general base of information. So even if you were to maybe try to play in a more like casual way, and I use the inverted commas very heavily here, it's almost like you've opened Pandora's box in your mind. You can't unlearn this information. Like, I know penalty takers are usually better. I know that people who get 90 minutes a week are usually slightly better. Set piece takers, now DEFCON as well. I can't, as much as I do try, I genuinely do try to unlearn that information sometimes, because it does like just like seep away some of the excitement. Like, it does stop me from going for a Ryan instead of a Tavernier, for instance. Like, but when you know that information, it's hard to unlearn it. And more people now know that information. And like I say, it is difficult for them to pretend that information doesn't exist. Now, you can disagree with the information, that's very different. But the ones that stick around for longer and the ones that play season after season do tend to have a process that works for them, hence they're successful, hence they play again. The ones that are just like off the wall crazy picks every single week, it only takes one bad season and they're like, oh, I can't be bothered to play that again, that was no fun. So it does tend to like almost be a bit of a sieve effect, where, or survival of the fittest, I guess, would be a better metaphor, where the players who have done well in FPL before play again because their methods have continued to work and it's repeatable. So season after season, I think it will get more difficult. And also, like, just fundamentally, I think we've all got to give ourselves a little bit more of a break. We're all trying to desperately get top 10K finishes or whatever every single year. There's like 5 times the amount of players who are engaged this time compared to like 5-10 years ago. It's difficult. It's much more difficult than it has ever been to get those high finishes. And maybe there will come a time where getting a top 1 million rank is seen as a point of success because there's just that many engaged players. Maybe now top 100K is the top 10K, for instance. Again, it's all arbitrary numbers at the end of the day, but I think some attention needs to be paid to just the fact that there are millions of players with the same sort of information and knowledge base as us listening or doing this pod right now, in comparison to the past, where it was a fraction of the same engaged crowd. And I think that is often forgotten at this time of the year.
Yeah. So I suppose some ways that they could potentially kind of alleviate this. And I mentioned earlier on, I do think that there's, because you've got such limited chips and they all kind of, they've been doubled. That's great. That's fun. You get the first half kind of throwaway stuff. The second half, it kind of feels a bit more regimented. I think that there are a couple of ways they could possibly do it. One, get rid of bench boost and just replace it with a couple of other things. Elite Serium, which is the same model as FPL, so it's basically the same game. They've got attack, which is all forwards get _2 that week, and part the bus, so all defenders get ×2 that week. And so imagine if you if you incorporated that into FPL, then suddenly when you play those and how you play those could be really interesting. And I think that could be one thing that they could possibly do, give you an option, 2 options for how both these ships could work in a big double. Which one do you go for? That creates variance and that creates kind of diversification. The other thing I've banged on about it for years and years and years is some idea of a sort of menu of chips where you can only use a few every year.
I like that.
And it's up to you to choose the right ones. It could be you've got one of attack or park the bus, and you can use one or the other, but not both. I mean, something like that could be good fun. I know they've tried to iterate a little bit with Alice Man last year, for example. So I think it's within their repertoire to introduce new things. I do think that they are open to innovating, as we've seen this year with DEFCON. We've seen this year with kind of the AFCON free transfers, which we all loved, and also the and also
forgot about those.
Yeah, and also how a few tweaks to the game as well in terms of how assists are given in a lot more liberal way. How points are a lot more easily given. So I'm hoping that they see what's happened this year and think, oh, maybe there should be something that they are looking to change a little bit. And I think that is I just hope that that's something which is going to precipitate them maybe thinking about it a little bit more. It might be that they just take another year of data, and we come back next year and it's completely the same, because there has been a lot of change this year. There might be another year for that to seep in, but yeah, I'm just hoping that with this new regime, Southern's at the wheel, and that we will see some more variation on the theme next year, because there is a lot more potential for it to grow. I'm not saying it becomes like a fancy Bundesliga where we start kind of sitting there counting Jules won, and then sit there kind of getting five. we're not looking at players getting 300 points a game week, and we're not getting login bonuses in terms of our underlying budget just for logging in every day. But I do think that there are a few things.
Wow.
But it's just basically made the whole thing redundant this year, because you can buy Kane, Elise, Diaz, basically have all of the stars of Bundesliga and still have like 34 million in the bank. Is ridiculous. But hopefully I think there's a lot of scope basically for them to change things, and especially when it comes to the end game. That's the big point of this, that the end game has been like historically the most exciting part of the FPL season, and I think that's part of why I was a little bit underwhelmed by what happened and why we're having this chat now, just because it does feel like it's been slightly diminished by everything that's gone on.
Yeah, I completely get what you mean. Like, usually at this point in the season, I'm really excited about the run-in. I'm like loading up on double game week players. I'm not telling my mates what's about to happen, but everyone knows, like everyone already is aware of it. And it is like, I like that, because it means I've got more people to talk about FPL with, which is great. Like, I talked to my brother about it. I talked to my mates down the pub. That is great. I love that side of it. But if everyone's got the same sort of players and the same teams, like, it feels like and not everyone, by the way, this is not accusing everyone. It's probably more about myself than anyone else, but it feels like we are more scared of losing than we are determined to win. And I sometimes catch myself like not taking a risk that I might have 10 years ago taken, partly through the fear of like, but what if it fails and then I fall behind all of my mates down the pub and my brother and you and all of my listeners, and like, not many listeners, but you get what I mean, like people who watch my shows, and it's embarrassing. Like there's just a lot more eyes on it, and not just me, anyone. Like, you go on X or you go on Blue Sky, there's loads of accounts that if you post a bad game week score or you put down a note on a player that is otherwise unpopular, if it doesn't succeed, you just get like hung out to dry effectively. There's a lot more judgment around, it feels like, and that is maybe playing on my mind more than it should do. I'm not sure if that resonates with, I don't think it will resonate with you necessarily, Tom, but I wonder if it resonates with other people out there, that it feels like there's more of a spotlight on the things that you do. And because there is quite a herd mentality, because there are huge content creators out there through no fault of their own, they're picking good players, those players become more popular, and then there becomes like, oh, why are you picking that guy? He's not very popular. Like he doesn't even have penalties, or he's not getting 90 minutes, or is he even going to start twice in this double game week? Like, there's a lot, it feels like there's a lot more of that, if that makes sense, compared to when I first joined the community. But that might just be more in my head. And Nobby correctly says on Blue Sky, that's much less of a problem than it is on X, for instance. But yeah, I don't know. Is that something that resonates with you at all, Tom?
I think maybe 7 or 8 years ago it would have. When I with FPL, Twitter was a nice place to be. I think now it's definitely the case that I'm not interested in that. But my life has changed. But I think you're definitely onto something in terms of the fact that the kind of the prevailing wisdom, the popular picks are just so popular. We've spoken about it already this year, but you've literally got probably a week of a player actually effectively scoring you points before suddenly they're no longer effectively scoring you points anymore. Imagine if O'Reilly didn't go off injured, came off of a 14, 15 pointer, next week's vets ownership would not be kind of 50%. It would be 100, it would be kind of 80, 90%. And that player is effectively wallpaper. And it really is about, it's even more about picking your moments, but it's picking your moments with the added sense of kind of, with that added sense of fear. I mean, we can both list loads of players, or at least think of loads of examples of players that we've either mentioned, tipped, flirted with buying in, and then pretty much due to the fact that, oh crap, if we miss out on this one, and it's maybe been something that we've been quite good at, or I'm quite good at least, by not being on FPL Twitter anymore and being more on Blue Sky side. But like, there's been so many, there've been in the past so many players that I can think of that I've bought in just out of fear of the fact that I know that there's going to be massive effective ownership on this guy because, he's just on a goal. There's a few good fixtures coming. Could he be the next Lingard? All of these things do kind of come to bear.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of closes very, very quickly closes the net on a player in terms of the gain that you can have. A player so quickly goes from a source of gain to a source of covering downside. I think in terms of the end game, that can be magnified because I think that the fact that those people did go with a particular wildcard team, yes, okay, on one hand, it's because those are sensible picks. Also, analytics-wise, those picks are all endorsed by analytics. I didn't look at FPL review for my wildcard, but I'm sure that it was probably kind of fairly heavily favoured by FPL review. And I think that and the fact is that a lot of the bigger voices do use FPL review, whether they admit it or not. And I think that those things kind of do feed into how this effective ownership grows to that critical mass. So, yeah, all in all, there's a lot of fear, I think, when it comes to the picks that people that make these days. And I think that, you do have genuine moments of brilliance or genuine moments of, generational game weeks. I know that there's an FPL Mayor, Brad, bought in Mavropanos this week and brought in Bowen this week.
Yeah.
Didn't go with the main strategy, and there he is, 102 points out of nowhere, and that's incredible. But those moments are so actually rare. Like that, they are like the exception that proves the rule. Because most of the time, if you go against the prevailing wisdom, you said it to me multiple times, Sam, you end up going to jail for taking a penny off the floor in a shop.
Yeah.
It is absolutely ridiculous, the punishment you can get from kind of just slightly going off beast.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that in terms of the end game, next week we could be sat here with the kind of standard bench boost, having scored 150, 160 points. And we're going to be very happy about that. But there will be a lot of people who are just kind of the upshot of that is going to be there's going to be a huge outcry about content creators. I've really seen it kind of start to happen, and there's going to be a huge outcry about analytics. It's going to be a huge sort of anti sort of a sheep or beigeness thing going on, and I think that's something that FPL do need to address really going forward for the health of the game. Honestly.
Yeah, I think the key thing I'd like to mention before wrapping up is if FPL get the balance of pricing and the way that points are scored correct, then it brings enough players into the mix at any given time that there shouldn't ever be a huge template at any point, minus like one or two picks that are just massively outperforming and they just look obvious. The best seasons I can think of are where players have been competitively priced all the way through the player pool, where you've got a real decision to make between different players at different prices, but also because there are teams that are also competitive with each other, you could go through for a completely different strategy. So let's say Salah and Haaland had kind of like matched each other this year. Some people might be on the Salah version of events, some might be on the Haaland, and then there's much more of a diversification of strategies, because if you don't have Haaland, you can have another striker and blah, 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 blah. It goes all the way down the line. I think this season has been particularly bad for this problem because everything's been instantly affordable, because all of the premiums have just been absolutely shocking. And there have been a ton of really cheap picks, underpriced picks that have got way more points than they would have previously because of DEFCON. And I think those two things have like leveled everything out. It's made everything very affordable, very easy to pick the best possible team for the majority of the season. And no one's really had any reason to suggest random picks. And also, what I would say, I'm on a podcast, so I am a content creator. I genuinely would not be blaming content creators for this. If there's an outcry against them because they've all picked the same sort of wildcard or whatever, I don't think that's fair, because what are they going to do? They're just going to like go on and ruin their credibility by saying, don't buy Haaland and Palmer, go for like Casemiro and Mavropanos. Like, the odd person might do that and they might get lucky and it might work out. That those were two random players, by the way, but they're not going to give intentionally poor advice, because more often than not, that won't work out. So like that, it would be disingenuous to all of their viewers to do so. They need to present the data, and then they can add layers of opinion on top of that, as we like to try and do. But it's quite difficult to like intentionally say, oh, I'm going different and I know it's the wrong bet. A bit like what I was saying with Palmer earlier. Like, I know that if I captain Palmer this week, it's not the right call. I know it's not. So I will have to, in every video, if I do it, I'm going to have to caveat and say, don't do this. It's bad advice, but I'm doing it because it means I could chase. But it takes ages to say that in every single video. It'd be much easier to just say Haaland's better, captain him, and then it would again appear disingenuous if I then go and captain Palmer behind everyone's back. It's quite difficult. And Hippie in the chat's mentioned content creators have tiny influence. I disagree, respectively. I think they've got a wider net than you think. That like the views they get are one thing, but also every person who views a video will then talk to their mates, and their mates will see them in the mini leagues, and they'll be like, oh, my mate who likes football, he's pretty plugged into FPL. He's got Semenyo. I'm going to get Semenyo. And so it might not be direct viewers, but it does cascade down. Like, I've got people in my mini leagues who have never watched an FPL video in their lives, but are 100% getting influenced by that cascading effect, where they've got a mate who's clearly like down the pub said, oh, by the way, you should get this guy. And the guy I watch has said this. Like, there's more than meets the eye with the content creators. I think there's a much wider pool of influence there, or a much wider spread of influence.
Yeah, certainly. All right. Well, I think we did our piece. Let's move to the end, and maybe we'll bring this back if we've got another week. Well, if I'm still around, at least. I'm sure I will be back at some point when the baby comes. But yeah. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Hope that was interesting, and going off piece for a bit of a meta chat, which I honestly find them more fun than the nuts and bolts week to week. I know we've got to do them on nuts and bolts, but on weeks like this, it's not. I don't know. Something about it just felt a bit like it was worth having that that kind of bolt on, rather than just kind of discussing kind of, right, here's what we're going to do this week. Here's how everything looks. Right, see you later.
Absolutely. I mean, it's nice to just vent. I think we've both been frustrated this season at times. I think a lot of managers have been at different points this season, and we all care about this game. We all want it to be a great game, and I think at times it is. It's just nice to vent those feelings, and if we have differing opinions, that's great too. Like, that's absolutely fine. And I would recommend at the end of the season, when FPL do their survey, as they always do, if you've got strong feelings about it, make sure you make those feelings known in the survey so that they've got good information to go off of for next season. I certainly will be, and I'm sure you will be too, Tom. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, though, thank you all for listening and for watching, and especially if you joined for the bolt-on chat at the end. I hope you enjoyed that as well. We have been Who Got the Assist. On Blue Sky, you can find us at Who Got the Assist, all written out one word. I'm FPL Pricey on there. On X, it's WGTA_FPL, and again, FPL Pricey for me. And on YouTube, it's Who Got the Assist, all written out one word, and again, FPL Pricey for me on there. If you did enjoy the pod, We'd really appreciate it if you could give us a follow on those social channels, give the pod a 5-star rating wherever you're listening. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube, hit like, leave a subscribe, and that would be very, very appreciated.
Yes, thank you, everybody. So hopefully you look forward to Double Game Week 33. WTA will be back next Wednesday as it comes to a close. Definitely Sam will be here. Maybe me, but if not, hopefully Tom Campbell can step in. We shall see. Either way, one of us and one Tom will see you next Wednesday.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?